Hello and welcome back. This is Mrs. Smith reading Indians of the Oaks by Melicent Lee, and this is Part 2, Secrets of the Trail, Chapter 4. This chapter is called Was Surprises Her Mother. 4 summers had come and gone, and the baby with big brown eyes still had no name. How can I name her when the name hasn't come just right? The Herbwoman asked herself. Very early one morning, the baby toddled to the little arched doorway of the hut. A light mist floated over the valley. The tops of the Indian huts rose out of the mist like sawed-off tops of haystacks. The whole village looked as if it were sunk in a bowl of violet jelly. The baby stopped in the doorway, looking about with wondering eyes, and then said one little word, Was. Was is the Indian name for mist. The Herbwoman, who was tying some herbs into bundles, heard her baby say this little word. Now the time has come, she said. The name has found itself. I will call her Was. And so Was became her name. Was always wanted to do exactly what her mother did. If her mother spread leaves in the sunshine, Was wanted to spread leaves too. If her mother winnowed seeds in a basket, Was wanted to winnow seeds too. If her mother ground up acorn meats, but Was couldn't do that no matter how much she wished she could. Um, the pestle was too heavy for her to hold. The old medicine man, her grandfather, promised to make a tiny bowl and pestle for her very own. One day the Herbwoman told Was that she was going up the oak hill where the basket grass grew. Now there were 2 kinds of basket material that the Indians used for the outside of their baskets. One kind of material was a reed that grew in the creek. The other was a twig of bush that grew among the young oaks. Of course, there was reed for the basket strainer too, but that doesn't count. Sometimes the reed for the strainer was used for making basket caps. It was the twig of a certain bush that the mother wished to get, the twig of the redberry or squaw bush. It made a stronger basket than the reed. The Herbwoman started walking across the meadow. She took no knife except her sharp fingernails, which were always with her. Little Was toddled after her. Was had hair that grew low on her forehead and fell over her eyes. Her chubby brown body was as strong as that of a baby coyote. As they crossed a little creek running happily through the meadow. A tiny strip of sand rose in the middle of it. On this sand lay a dead little hermit thrush. Its back was red-brown, and its breast was splashed with dots. Baby Was ran over to the little bird and knelt down beside it. She cooed over it softly, then pressed it all over. When her tiny fingers reached its throat, she felt a hard lump. She opened the bird's mouth and found a big red manzanita seed sticking in its throat. The seed was just big enough to choke a little bird. Oh, if I had been there in time, you wouldn't have died, thought Was. I could have taken the little seed out of your throat. She carried the little bird to the Herbwoman. The Herbwoman told her to toss it away in a bush. But Was didn't want to do that, so her mother let her make a little fire from the oak punk in her olla to burn up the pretty bird in the real Indian way. She wrapped the ashes in a sycamore leaf because she had no little olla in which to put them, and she buried the leaf in the soft earth. If only you could have told me, little bird, thought Was. She looked out for something to put on the grave, something that she knew the little bird had liked. She could only find one little tiny brown feather that had not been burned. I guess you liked your feather pretty well, said little Was. You couldn't fly in the air without your feather. So saying, she stuck the feather over the grave. Then she ran after her mother. The Herbwoman stopped on the top of the hill and looked all around her. Live oaks grew freely here. Mixed with the oaks were the little basket bushes. Their leaves looked almost exactly like the leaves of the poison oak. They glowed like rabbit's ears with the sun shining through them. The Herbwoman sniffed and sniffed. There are better bushes in the next clearing, she said. Baby Was sniffed and sniffed. Her nose was little and stubby, but she could smell something strange. It smelled like a skunk. Is it a skunk? She asked her mother. It is not a skunk. It is the basket bush. It does not smell nice, said Was. It smells nice to a basket maker, said her mother. How could I carry my herbs if I did not have a basket? The herb woman began to snip off the branches of the basket bush in the next clearing. These baskets had a very strong odor, especially when she snipped them. They bent easily. Then the herb woman sat down in a comfortable spot and began pulling off the outside bark of the branches. It was the twig inside the brown bark that she wanted for her basket, the clean white twig. She peeled off the bark with her thumbnail. Some of the women can't do that, she said to herself. They soak it off, but I am the herb woman. An herb woman knows many secrets. Baby Wasp was having a secret all to herself during this time. She was gathering some basket twigs behind her mother's back. I'm going to surprise her when I get home, she thought. She stuffed the basket brush into the little net that one of the old sisters in the wild rose patch had made for her. When the herb woman started for home, little Wasp kept well behind her. Her mother didn't know anything about the surprise. On the way home, the herb woman passed the huge nest of a pack rat or a wood rat. The nest was built on the ground. It looked like an Indian hut had fallen down in an east wind. It was built out of sticks. Aha! thought the herb woman. Now here is something I like. I haven't eaten a wood rat for a long time. She put down her basket twigs and sat down beside the nest. She picked up a strong stick that lay beside her. I'll whack him when he comes out, she said. Wasp stopped there. Wasp stopped where she was, away from her mother. She didn't want her mother to see the surprise she had for her, and she didn't want her footsteps to make the earth shake. Even a child's footstep would be felt by a rat, and then he wouldn't come out of his house. Her mother sat as quietly as a rock rests on the ground. She didn't move a hair. She held up the stick in her hand. Wasp sat as still as a little rock. While they were both waiting for the rat, Wasp noticed that the first Wasp noticed for the first time that she was sitting under an elder bush. The elderberries looked like tiny frosty green apples. She wondered if she could pull down a branch without scaring the rat. A twig hung over her head. Just as she raised her arm, whack! And her mother's stick came to the earth. It happened so quickly that the rat didn't ever know he had been struck. Elderberries and rat! Elderberries and rat! Wasp, not forgetting her excitement to gather a bundle of elderberry branches. She was so happy thinking about the good supper they would have that night. Her mother spent the rest of the day preparing basket twigs for the three old sisters in the wild rose patch, for one was blind, one had rheumatism in her hand, which rheumatism just means pain, and the other, we will just whisper it, the other was lazy. uh, but it would have been too bad to make two of the sisters go without a basket because of the third. The roasted wood rat and the cool elderberries were just as good as Wasp had expected, and soon after supper she fell asleep. She slept beside the warm ashes of the fire. Her mother always fixed the fire so it would not spark, so that not one spark flew out. In the middle of the night, Wasp woke up with a low wail. Oh! She felt as if red ants were crawling all over her, or perhaps a nettle was pricking her, or perhaps, oh! She wailed like a coyote. Her mother rose from beside her on the earth floor and looked all over her in the soft firelight. You've been poisoned with poison oak, she said. Have you been touching it? Oh, wailed Wasp. Her mother poked a stick in the fire, lighted it, and looked about the hut. She had found the net that the old sister in the wild rose patch had made for Wasp. The net was stuffed with poison oak. I thought it was basket brush, sobbed Wasp. The herb woman said clearly to her daughter, her words falling slowly, Poison oak looks very much like the squaw bush, the basket bush. It grows in the same places, too, which makes it harder to tell from one another. But the leaves are larger. There's always one sure way that you can tell them apart. Sniff them. The basket bush smells like a skunk, but don't get your face too close when you sniff. Oh, wailed Wasp, I shall always sniff before I pick. It is well, said the herb woman. It is better to think once than to cure twice. So saying, she took a piece of baked salt, mixed it with water, and made a wash for her little daughter. The wash cooled all the little red flames on Wasp's skin. She slept again, but she was not cured of the poison oak for over a week. All right, that's chapter 4. Join me next week for chapter 5. Bye-bye.